Lonesome Traveler by Jack Kerouac, Chapter 1. Piers of the Homeless Night. Here down on dark earth, before we all go to heaven, visions of America, all that hitchhiking, all that railroading, all that coming back to America via Mexican and Canadian borders. Let's begin with the sight of me with collar huddled up close to neck and tied around with a handkerchief to keep it tight and snug as I go trudging across the bleak, dark warehouse lots of the ever-loving San Pedro waterfront, the oil refineries smelling in the damp, foggish night of Christmas 1951, just like burning rubber in the brought-up mysteries of Sea Hag Pacific. Where just off to my left as I trudge, you can see the oily skeel of old Blay waters marching up to hug the scumming posts, and out on over the Flatiron waters are the lights ululating in the moving tide, and also lights of ships and bum boats themselves moving and closing in and leaving this last lip of American land. Out on that dark ocean, that wild dark sea, where the worm invisibly rides to come, like a hag flying and laid out as if casually on sad sofa, but her hair flying and she's on her way to find the crimson joy of lovers and eat it up. Death by name, the doom and death ship, the SS Romer, painted black with orange booms, was coming now like a ghost and without a sound except for its vastly shuddering engine, to be warped and wailed in the San Pedro pier, fresh from a run from New York through the Panama Canal. And aboard's my old buddy Denny Blue, let's call him, who had me travel 3,000 miles overland on buses, with the promise he will get me on, and I sail the rest of the trip around the world. And since I'm well and on the bum again, and I ain't got nothing else to do but roam, long-faced, the real America, with my unreal heart, here I am, eager and ready to be a big busted nose scullion or dishwasher on the old scoff-scos, long as I can buy my next fancy shirt in a Hong Kong haberdashery, or wave a polo mallet in some old Singapore bar, or play with the horses in Australia. And it's all the same to me as long as it can be exciting and goes around the world. For weeks I've been traveling on the road, west from New York, and waiting up in Frisco at a friend's house, meanwhile earning an extra $50 working the Christmas rush as a baggage handler with the old sop-out railroad. I've just now come the 500 miles down from Frisco as an honored secret guest in the caboose of the Zipper first-class freight train, thanks to my connections on the railroad up there, and now I think I'm going to be a big seaman. I'll get on the Romer right here in Pedro. So I think fondly, anyway. If it wasn't for the shipping, I'd sure like it maybe to be a railroad man, learn to be a brakeman, get paid to ride that old zooming zipper. But I'd been sick, a sudden choking, awful cold of the Virus X type California style, and could hardly see out the dusty window of the caboose as it flashed past the snowy breaking surf at Surf and Tangier of Gaviota on the division that runs that moony rail between San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara. I tried my best to appreciate a good ride, but could only lay flat on the caboose seat with my face buried in the bundled jacket, and every conductor from San Jose to Los Angeles had to wake me up to ask me about my qualifications. I was a brakeman's brother and a brakeman in Texas Division myself, so whenever I looked up thinking, "Old Jack, you're now actually riding in a caboose and going along the surf on the spectralest railroad you'd ever in your wildest dreams want to ride, like a kid's dream, why is it you can't lift your head and look out there and appreciate the feathery shore of California, the last land being feathered by fine powdery skeel of doorstop sills of doorstep water weaving in from every orient and bay boom shroud, from here to Catarus, Flapperus, Voldivius, and Graterus. Boy! But I'd raise my head, and nothing there was to see except my bloodshot soul, and vague hints of unreal moon shining on an unreal sea, and the flash-by quick of the pebbles of the roadbed, the rail in the starlight. Arriving in L.A. in the morning, and I stagger with full, huge cuddle bag on shoulder from the L.A. yards clear into downtown Main Street, L.A., where I laid up in a hotel room 24 hours drinking bourbon, lemon juice, and Anacin, and seeing as I lay on my back a vision of America that had no end, which was only beginning. Thinking, though, I'll get on that Roma at Pedro and be gone for Japan before you can say boo. looking out the window, and I felt a little better and digging the hot, sunny streets of LA Christmas. Going down finally to the Skid Row pool halls and shoe shine joints and gouging around, waiting for the time when the roamer would warp in at the Pedro Pier where I was to meet Denny right at the gangplank with the gun he'd sent ahead. More reasons than one for the meeting in Pedro. He'd sent a gun ahead inside of a book, which he'd carefully cut and hollowed out and made into a tight, neat package covered with brown paper and tied with string, addressed to a girl in Hollywood, Helen something, with the address which he gave me. Now, Kerouac, when you get to Hollywood, you go immediately to Helen's and ask her for that package I sent her. Then you carefully open it with your hotel room, and there's the gun, and it's loaded, so be careful, don't shoot your finger off. Then you put it in your pocket. Do you hear me, Kerouac? Has it gotten in your heskefuffle, frantic imagination? But now you've got a little errand to do for me, for your boy Denny Blue. Remember, we went to school together. We thought up ways to survive together, to scrounge for pennies. We were even cops together. We even married the same woman. I mean, we both wanted the same woman, Kerouac. It's up to you now to help defend me against the evil of Matthew Peters. You bring that gun with you, poking me and emphatically pronouncing each word and poking me with each word, and bring it on you, and don't get caught and don't miss the boat whatever you do. A plan so absurd, so typical of this maniac. I came, of course, without the gun, without even looking up Helen. But just in my beat-up jacket hurrying, almost late, I could see her masts close in against the pier, nights, spotlights, everywhere. Down that dismal long plaza of refineries and oil storage tanks on my poor scuffled down shoes that had begun a real journey now. Starting in New York to follow the fool ship, but it was about to be made plain to me in the first 24 hours I'd never get on no ship. Didn't know it then, but was doomed to stay in America, always. Road, rail, or water screw, it'll always be America. Orient-bound ships chugging up the Mississippi, as will be shown later. No gun, huddled against the awful winter damp of Pedro and Long Beach in the night, passing the Puss in Boots factory on a corner with little lawn out front and America flagpoles and a big tuna fish ad inside the same building they make fish for humans and for cats. Passing the Matson Piers, the lure line not in. Eyes peeled for Matthew Peters, the villain who was behind the need for the gun. It went back maniacally to further earlier events in this gnashing, huge movie of Earth, only a piece of which here is offered by me, long though it is. How wild can the world be until you finally realize, oh well, it's just repetitious anyway. But Denny had deliberately wrecked this Matthew Peters car. It seemed they'd lived together and with a bunch of girls in Hollywood. They were seamen. You saw snapshots of them sitting around sunny pools in bathing suits and with blondes and in big hugging poses. Denny, tall, fattish, dark, smiling, white teeth, hypocrite smile. Matthew Peters, an extremely handsome blonde with a self-assured, grim expression, or morbid expression of sin and silence, the hero of the group of the time. So that you could hear it always spoken, the confidential stories told to you by every drunk and non-drunk in every bar and non-bar from here to the other side of the Tathagata worlds and the 10 quarters of the universe. It's like the ghosts of all the mosquitoes that had ever lived. The density of the story of the world, all of it would be enough to drown the Pacific as many times as you could remove a grain of sand from its sandy bed. The big story was the big complaint. But I heard chanted from Denny, an old complainer and chanter and one of the most vituperative of complainers. While I was scrounging around in the garbage cans and barrels of Hollywood, mind you, going behind those very fancy apartment houses and at night, late, very quietly sneaking around, getting bottles for 5-cent deposits and putting them in my little bag for extra money, when we couldn't get longshore work and nor get a ship for love nor money. Matthew, with his airy ways, was having big parties and spending every cent he could get from my grimy hands, and not once did I hear one word of appreciation. You can imagine how I felt when finally he took my best girl and took off with her for a night. I sneaked to his garage where he had his car parked. I very quietly backed it out without starting the motor. I let it roll down the street, and then, man, I was on my way to Frisco, drinking beers from cans. I could tell you a story. And so he goes on with his story, told in his most inimitable way. How he wrecked the car in Cucamonga, California, a head-on crash into some tree. How he almost got killed, how the cops were, and lawyers and papers and troubles. How he finally got to Frisco and got another ship. And how Matthew Peters, who knew he was on the roamer, would be waiting at the pier head at this very same clammy cold night in Pedro with a gun, a knife, henchmen, friends, anything and everything. Then he was going to step off the ship looking in all directions, ready to throw himself flat on the ground, and I was to be waiting there at the foot of the gangplank and hand him the gun real quick, all in the foggy, foggy night. All right, tell me a story. Gently now. Well, you're the one who started all this. Gently, gently, says Denny in his own peculiar way, saying, gent, very loud, with mouth mowed, like a radio announcer, to pronounce every sound, and then the Lee is just said English-wise. It was a trick we both picked up at a certain madcap prep school where everybody went around talking like a very high smats. Now schmoose, schmassas, inexplicable, the foolish tricks of schoolboys long ago lost, which Denny now in the absurd San Pedro night was still quipping up to Fogs as if it didn't make any difference. Gently, says Denny, taking a firm grip on my arm and holding me tight and looking at me seriously. He's about 6'3", and he's looking down at little 5'9" me, and his eyes are dark, glittering. You can see he's mad. You can see his conception of life is something no one else has ever and ever will have, though just as seriously he can go around believing it and claiming his theory about me, for instance. Kerouac is a victim of his own imagination, or his favorite joke about me, which is supposed to be so funny, isn't it? It is the saddest story ever told or anyone ever told. Kerouac wouldn't accept a leg of fried chicken one night, and when I asked him why, he'd say, I'm thinking about the poor starving people of Europe. And he goes off and on his fantastic laugh, which is a great shrieking laughter into the sky, designed specially for him, in which I always see over him when I think of him the black night, the around the world night, the night he stood on the pier in Honolulu with contraband Japanese kimonos on, 4 of them, and the customs guards made him undress down to them. And there he stands at night on the platform in Japanese kimonos, big, huge Denny Blue, downcast and very, very unhappy. I could tell you a story that's so long I couldn't finish telling it to you if we took a trip around the world, Kerouac. You won't, you never listen, Kerouac. What are you going to tell the poor people starting in Europe about the Puss in Boots plant there with the tuna fish in back? Yeah, they make the same food for cats and people. And when he laughed like that, you know he was having a hell of a good time and lonely in it, because I never saw it to fail. The fellas on the ship and all ships he ever sailed on couldn't see what was so funny withal. Also his practical joking, which I'll show. I wrecked Matthew Peters' car, you understand. Now let me say, of course, I didn't do it deliberately. Matthew Peters would like to think so. A lot of evil skulls like to believe so. Paul Lehman likes to believe so. He can also believe I stole his wife, which I assure you, Kerouac, I think I do. It was my buddy Harry McKinley who stole Paul Lehman's wife. I drove Matthew's car to Frisco. I was going to leave it there on the street and ship out. He would have got the thing back, but unfortunately, Kerouac, life isn't always coming the way we like and tie, but the name of the town I can never and I shall never be able to. Kerouac, you're not listening, gripping my arm. Gently now, are you listening to what I'm saying to you? Of course I'm listening. Then why are you going, what's up there? The bird's up there. You heard the bird there. Me, turning away with a little snuffle, lonely laugh. This is when I see the true Denny now, when he turns away. It isn't a big joke. There was no way to make it a big joke. He was talking to me, and then he tried to make a joke out of my seeming not listening, and it wasn't funny because I was listening. In fact, I was seriously listening as always to all his complaints and songs, but he turned away and had tried, and in a forlorn little look into his own, as if past, you see the double chin or dimple chin of some big baby nature folding up and withdrew with a heartbreaking French giving up, humility, meekness even. He ran the gamut from absolutely malicious plotting and scheming and practical joking to big angel Ananda baby morning in the night. I saw him, I know. Cucamonga, Practamanga, Kalamanganara. I shall never remember the name of that town, but I ran the car head into a tree, Jack, and that was that, and I was set up upon by every scroungy cop, lawyer, judge, doctor, Indian chief, insurance salesman, conman type in the... I tell you, I was lucky to get away alive. I had to wire home for all kinds of money. As you know, my mother in Vermont has all my savings, and when I'm in real pitch, I always wire home. It's my money. Yes, Denny. But to cap everything, there was Matthew Peters' buddy Paul Lehman, who had a wife, who ran away with Harry McKinley, or in some other way that I could never understand. They took a lot of money and got on an Orient-bound passenger vessel and were now living with an alcoholic major in a villa in Singapore and having a big time in white duck trousers and tennis shoes. But Lehman, the husband, also a seaman and in fact a shipmate of Matthew Peters, and though Den didn't know at the time aboard the Lurline, both of them, keep that, bang, he was convinced Denny was behind that too. And so the both of them had sworn to kill Denny or get Denny, and according to Denny, they were going to be on the pier when the ship came in that night with guns and friends. And I was to be there, ready, when Denny comes off the gangplank swiftly and all dressed up to go to Hollywood to see his stars and girls and all the big things he written me. I'm to step up quickly and hand him the gun, loaded and cocked, and Denny, looking around carefully to see no shadows leap up, ready to throw himself flat on the ground, takes the gun from me, and together we cut into the darkness of the waterfront and rush to town for further developments. So now the Roamer was coming in. It was being straightened out along the concrete pier. I stood and spoke quietly to one of the after deck hands struggling with ropes. Where's the carpenter? Who, Blue? I'll see him in a minute. A few other requests, and out comes Denny, just as the ship is being winched and secured, and the ordinaries putting out the rat guards, and the captain's blowed his little whistle, and that incomprehensible, huge, slow motion eternity move of ships is done. You hear the churns, the backwater churns, the pissing of scuppers. The big ghostly trip is done, the ship is in. The same human faces are on the deck. Here comes Denny in his dungarees, and unbelievably in the foggy night he sees his boy standing right there on the quay, just as planned, with hands a pocket, almost could reach out and touch him. There you are, Kerouac. I never thought you'd be here. You told me to, didn't you? Wait, another half hour to finish up and clean up and dress. I'll be right with you. Anybody around? I don't know. I looked around. I've been looking around for a half hour at parked cars, dark corners, holes of sheds, door holes, niches, crypts of Egypt, waterfront rat holes, crapule door holes, and beer can clouds, mid-mast booms, and fishing eagles. Bah, nowhere the heroes were nowhere to be seen. Two of the saddest dogs you ever saw, walking off that pier in the dark, past a few custom guards who gave Denny a customary little look. It wouldn't have found the gun in his pocket anyway, but he'd taken all those pains to mail it in that hollowed-out tome, and now as we peered around together, he whispered, Well, have you got it? Yeah, in my pocket. Hang on to it. Give it to me outside on the street. Don't worry. I guess they're not here, but you never can tell. I looked everywhere. Well, get out of here. We'll get out of here and make tracks. I've got it all planned, Kerouac. What we're going to do tonight and tomorrow and the whole weekend. I've been talking to all the cooks. We've got it all planned. A letter for you down to Jim Jackson at the hall, and you're going to sleep in the cadet stateroom on board. Think of it, Kerouac, a whole stateroom to yourself. And Mr. Smith has agreed to come with us and celebrate. Mr. Smith was the fat, pale, pot-bellied wizard of the bottom skeels of the engine room, a wiper, oiler, general water tender. He was the funniest old guy you'd ever wish to see, and already Denny was laughing and feeling good and forgetting the imaginary enemies. Out on the Piers street, it was evident we were in the clear. Denny was wearing an expensive Hong Kong blue serge suit with soldiers in his shoulder pads and a fine drape, a beautiful suit in which now, beside mine and my road rags, he stomped along like a French farmer throwing his biggest brogans over the Rose de Blédain, like a Boston hoodlum scuffling along the common on Saturday night to see the guys at the pool hall, but in his own way, with cherubic Denny's smile that was heightened tonight by the fog, making his face jovial, round, and red, though not old. But what with the sunshine of the trip through the canal, he looked like a Dickens character stepping to his post-chaise and dusty roads. Only what a dismal scene spread before us as we walked. Always with Denny, it's walking, long, long walks. He wouldn't spend $1 on a cab because he likes to walk, but also there were those days when he went out with my first wife and used to shove her right through the subway turnstile before she could realize what happened. From the back, naturally. A charming little trick to save a nickel. A pastime at which old Den's unbeatable, as could be shown. We came along the Pacific Red car tracks after a fast hike of about 20 minutes along those dreary refineries and water-skill slap-house stop-holes under impossible skies laden, I suppose, with stars, but you could see their dirty blur in the Southern Californian Christmas. Kerouac, we are now at the Pacific Red car tracks. Do you have any faint idea as to what that thing is? Can you tell me what you think you can? But Kerouac, you've always struck me as being the funniest man I've ever known. No, Denny, you are the funniest man I've ever known. Don't interrupt, don't drool, don't. The way he answered and always talked, and he's leading the way across the red car tracks to a hotel in downtown San Pedro where someone was supposed to meet us with blondes, and so he bought en route a couple of small hand cases of beer for us to portable around with. And when we got to the hotel, which had potted palms and potted bar fronts and cars parked and everything dead and windless, with that dead California sad windless smoke, smog, and the Pachucos going by in a hot rod, and Denny saying, "You see that bunch of Mexicans in that car with their blue jeans? They got one of our seamen here last Christmas, about a year ago. He was doing nothing but minding his own business, but they jumped out that car and beat the living hell out of him. They take his money. No money. It's just to be mean. They're Pachucos. They just like to beat up on people for the hell of it." When I was in Mexico, it didn't seem to me the Mexicans there were like that. The Mexicans in the U.S. is another matter, Kerouac. If you'd been around the world like I have, you could see, as I do, a few of the rough facts of life that apparently you never, and the poor people starving in Europe, you'll never, never understand. Gripping my arm again, swinging as he walks, like in our prep school days when we used to go up the sunny morning hill to Horace Mann at 246th in Manhattan, on the rock cliffs over by the Van Cortlandt Park, the little road going up through English half-timber cottages and apartment houses to the ivied school on top, the whole bunch swinging uphill to school, but nobody ever went as fast as Denny, as he never paused to take a breath. The climb was very sharp. Most had to wind and work and whine and moan along, but Denny swung it with his big glad laugh. In those days he'd sell daggers to the rich little fourth formers in back of the toilets. He was up to more tricks tonight. "Kerouac, I'm going to introduce you to two Cucamongas in Hollywood tonight if we can get there on time. Tomorrow for sure. Two Cucamongas living in a house, in an apartment house. The whole thing built clear around a swimming pool. Do you understand what I said, Kerouac? A swimming pool that you can go swimming in." I know. I seen it in that picture of you and Matthew Peters and all the blondes. Great. What did we do? Work on them? Wait a minute. Before I explain the rest of the story to you, hand me the gun. "I haven't got the gun, you fool. I was only saying that so you'd get off the ship. I was ready to help you if anything happened." "You haven't got it?" It dawned on him he had boasted to the whole crew. "My boy's out there on the pier with the gun. What did I tell you?" And he had earlier, when the ship left New York, posted a big, absurd, typically Denny ridiculous poster printed in red ink on a piece of paper. Warning, there are fellows on the west coast by the names of Matthew Peters and Paul Lehman who would like nothing better than to clobber the carpenter of the Romer Denny E. Blue, if only they could, but any shipmates of the Blue want to help on the lookout for those two evil scoundrels when the ship puts in at Pedro, and there will be appreciation. Signed, Carpenter, free drinks and the Carpenter tonight. And then, by word in the mess room, he loudly boasted his boy. I knew you'd tell everyone I had the gun, so I said I did. Didn't you feel better walking off the ship? Where is it? I didn't even go. Then it's still there. We'll have to pick it up tonight. He was lost in thought. It was okay. Then he had big plans for what was going to happen at the hotel, which was the El Carrido Puerto Paota, California Potator Hotel, as I say, with potted palmettos and seamen inside, and also hot rod champion sons of aircraft computadors of Long Beach. The whole general and really dismal California culture, a palpable hangout for it, where you saw the dim interiors, where you saw the Hawaiian shirted and bee-wrist-watched, tan, strong young men tilting long, thin beers to their mouths and leaning and mincing with broads and fancy necklaces and with little white ivory things at their tanned ears and a whole blank blue in their eyes that you saw. Also a bestial cruelty hidden in the smell of beer and smoke and smart smell of the cool inside plush cocktail lounge, all that Americanness that in my mouth you had me get wild to be in and leave my home and go off to Big Hero in the American romance me jazz night. That had made Denny lose his head too. At one time he had been a sad, infuriated French boy brought over on a ship to attend American private schools, at which hate smoldered in his bones and in his dark eyes, and he wanted to kill the world. But a little of the sage and wisdom education from the masters of the High West, and he wanted to do his hating and killing in cocktail lounges learned from Frank Chotone movies, and God knows where and what else. We come up to this thing down the drear boulevard, Phantasm Street with its bright street lamps, and very bright but somber palms jutting out of the sidewalk, all pineapple ribbed and rising into the indefinable California night sky and no wind. Inside there was no one to meet Denny as usual, mistaken and completely ignored by everyone. Good form, but he don't know it. So we have a couple of beers ostensibly waiting. Denny outlines me more facts and personal sophistries. There ain't no one coming, no friends, no enemies either. Denny is a perfect Taoist. Nothing happens to him. The trouble runs off his shoulders like water, as if he had big pig grease on them. He don't know how lucky he is. And here he's got his boy at his side, old Tijan, who'll go anywhere, follow anyone for his adventure. Suddenly, in the middle of the third or so beer, he whoops and realizes we missed the hourly red car train, and that is going to hold us up another hour in dismal Pedro. We want to get to the glitters of Los Angeles, if possible, or Hollywood before all the bars close. In my mind's eye, I see all the wonderful things Denny has planned for us there, and see, incomprehensible, unrememberable, what the images were. I was now inventing ere we going and arrived at the actual scene. Not the screen, but the dismal four-dimensional scene itself. Bang! Denny wants to take a cab and chase the red car along with our beer cans and hand cartons. We go jogging the street to a cab stand and hire one to chase the red car, which the guy does without comment, knowing the egocentricities of seamen as oh, how dismal cab driver in a oh, how dismal pierhead jumping town. Off we go. It's my suspicion he isn't really driving as fast as he ought to actually catch the red car, which highballs right now down that line towards Compton at environs of LA at 60 per. My suspicion is he doesn't want to get a ticket and at the same time go fast enough to satisfy the whims of the seaman in the back. It's my suspicion he's just gonna chip old Den out of a $5 bill. Nothing Den likes better than throw away his $5 bills, too. He thrives on it. He lives for it. He all takes voyages around the world, working bellow decks among electrical equipment, but worse than that, take the abuse of officers and men. At 4 o'clock in the morning, he's asleep in his bunk. Hey, carpenter, are you the carpenter or are you the chief bottle stopper, shithouse watcher? That goddamn forward boom light is out again. I don't know who's using slingshots around here, but I want that goddamn light fixed. We'll be pulling into Penang in 2 hours, and goddamn, if it's still dark at that time and we don't got no light, it's your ass, not mine. See the chief about it. So Denny has to get up, and I can just see him do it, rub the innocent sleep from his eyes and wake to the cold, howling world and wish he had a sword so he could cut the man's head off. But at the same time, he doesn't want to spend the rest of his life in a prison either, or get his own head partially cut off and spend the rest of his life paralyzed with a shoe brace in his neck and people bring him crap pans. So he crawls out of bed and does the bidding of every beast that has every yell to throw at him for every reason in the 1001 electrical apparatus on the goddamn stinking steel gel, which, as far as I'm concerned, and floating on a water too, is what they call a ship. What is $5 to a martyr? Step on the gas, we gotta catch that car. I'm going fast enough, you'll get it. He passes right through Cucamonga at exactly 11:38 in 1947 or 1948. Now I can't remember which one exactly, but I remember I'd done this for another seaman a couple of years ago, and he passed right through. And he goes on talking, easing up, so not to pass through the insulting part of just barely beating a red light. And I lay back in the seat and say, you could have made that red light. We'll never make it now. Listen, Jack, you want to make it, don't you, and not get fined by some traffic cop? Where? I say, looking out the window and all over the horizon at those marshes of night for signs of a cop on a motorcycle or a cruiser. All you see is marshes and great black distances of night, and far off on hills, the little communities with Christmas lights in their windows blaring red, blaring green, blaring blue, suddenly sending pangs through me, and I think, America's so big, so sad, so black. You're like the leaves of a dry summer that go crinkly ere August found its end. You're hopeless. Everyone you look on you, there's nothing but the dry, drear hopelessness, the knowledge of impending death, the suffering of present life. Lights of Christmas won't save you or anybody anymore. You could put Christmas lights on a dead bush in August at night, and it could look like something. What is this Christmas you profess in this void, in this nebulous cloud? That's perfectly all right, said Denny. Move right along, we'll make it. He beats the next light to make it look good, but eases up for the next, and up the track and back you can't see any sign of the rear or front of no red car. Shoot. He comes to his place where a couple of years ago he dropped that seaman. No red car. You can feel its absence. It's come and gone, empty smell. You can tell by the electric stillness on the corner that something just was and ain't. Well, I guess I missed it, god dang it, said the cab driver, pushing his hat back to apologize and looking real hypocritical about it. So Denny gives him $5 and we get out, and Denny says, Kerouac, this means we have an hour to wait here by the coal tracks in the cold foggy night for the next train to L.A. That's okay, I say. We got beer, ain't we? Open one up. Denny fishes down for the old copper church key and comes up 2 cans of beer spissing all over the sad night, and we end up the tin and go slurp. 2 cans each, and we start throwing rocks at signs, dancing around to keep warm, squatting, telling jokes, remembering the past. Denny's got going, hurrah, roar, hoo, and again I hear his great laugh ringing in the American night, and I try to tell him, Denny, the reason I followed the ship all the way 3,200 miles from Staten Island to goddamn Pedro is not because I want to get on and be seen going around the world and have myself a ball in Port Swettenham and pick up on Ganges and Bombay and find the sleepers and flute players in filthy Karachi and start revolutions of my own in the Cairo Kasbah and make it from Marseille to the other side, but because of you, because the things we used to do, where I have a hell of a good time with you, Dan. There's no 2 ways about. I never have any money, that I admit. I already owe you $60 for the bus fare, but you must admit I try. I'm sorry that I don't have any money either. But you know I tried with you that time. Well, goddamn, wahoo, shit. I want to get drunk tonight. And Denny says, we don't have to hang around in the cold like this, Jack. Look, there's a bar over there. A roadhouse gleaming redly in the misty night. It may be a Mexican pachuca bar, and we might get the hell beat out of us, but let's go in there and wait the half hour we got with a few beers and see if there's any cucamongas. So we head out there across an empty lot. Denny is meanwhile very busy telling me what a mess I've made of my life. But I've heard that from everybody coast to coast, and I don't care generally, and I don't care tonight, and this is my way of doing and saying things. A couple of days later, the SS Romer sails away without me because they wouldn't let me get on at the Union Hall. I had no seniority. All I had to do, they said, was hanging around a couple of months and work on the waterfront or something and wait for a coastwise ship to Seattle. And I thought, so if I'm going to travel coasts, I'm going to go down the coast I covet. So I see the Romer slipping out of Pedro Bay at night again. The red port light and the green starboard light sneaking across the water with attendant ghostly following mast lights. Whoop. The whistle of the little tug. Then the ever Gandharva-like illusion and Maya-like dim lights of the portholes where some members of the crew are reading in bunks, others eating snacks in the crew mess, and others, like Denny, eagerly writing letters with a big red ink fountain pen assuring me that next time around the world I will get on the Romer. But I don't care. I'll go to Mexico, says I, and walk off to the Pacific red car waving at Denny's ship vanishing out there. Among the madcap pranks we pulled after that first night I told you about, we carried a huge tumbleweed up the gangplank at 3 a.m. Christmas Eve and shoved it into the engine crew castle, where they were all snoring, and left it there. When they woke up in the morning, they thought they were somewhere else, in the jungle or something, and all went back to bed. So when the chief engineer is yelling, "Who the hell put that tree on board?" It was 10 feet by 10 feet, a big ball of dry twigs. Way off across and down the ship's iron heart, you hear Denny howling, "Hoo, hoo, hoo, who the hell put that tree on board? Oh, that chief engineer is a funny mahiron."